hang on. That's all you have to do, hang on.
Oh, Mama and Papa Avery, I said this one's for you. Just letting you know the world can see what they have put you through. Not that we could ever fathom or try to imagine the depth of your pain. But the case was a sham, the trial was a scam. The DA, he's a legal stain. I said, Mama and Papa Avery, we stand with you. No matter what.
You guys got lots of questions?
The state says, oh, their lies we see through, because the blood, it was a planet. The car was a planet. Sam William Henry 582. The bones they were planted, the bullet, yeah, planted. The key in the bedroom too. I said, Mama and Papa Avery, we send our love to you. Just letting you know we can't see what they did and continue to do. Oh, Mama and Papa Avery, said this one's for you. Just letting you know the world can see what they have put you through.
All right. Hello, everybody. How you doing? Let me turn my camera on so y'all can see me. Here I am. How's everybody doing? Obviously, so let me first address those of you who were waiting for the Leo R video that I was talking about that was going to be coming out. Unfortunately, I didn't get home from work as early as I'd hoped. So all I can tell you is it's in the can, it's ready to go, and as soon as Travis and I are done here answering questions regarding ineffective assistance of counsel in the motion for post-conviction relief, I will be uploading that as a premiere, so we can all go over and watch that afterwards as well. So just so you know. So that's coming. It's there. Don't worry. I'm not teasing you. It's coming. It's there. So don't worry. Anyways, moving on. Today, we're here to talk about the motion for post-conviction relief, ineffective assistance of counsel section, the largest section, really, in the brief. It's over 100 pages, of just ineffective assistance of counsel, and she's just going over basically things that they failed to look into. Mostly is just stuff they failed to look into, stuff they didn't do, which she did, so that's kind of the contrast of it, but. So that's what it is. Mainly, it's a lot of points. I hope you guys, watched the premieres and saw everything that we went over. And hopefully we can answer some questions for you here tonight. Travis, would you like to say hello to everybody?
Hello, everybody. Great to see you. I'm glad that Jose's microphone is working today, and we can hear him loud and clear.
He jinxed me. He jinxed me, guys. He jinxed me yesterday.
Certainly makes it a lot nicer when there's a dialogue rather than somebody said today in Discord that they read lips. So that would have come in really handy last night. But I'm glad you're loud and clear. I'm glad you were able to re-upload it.
Sorry.
But Hey, everybody. I saw a lot of our friends at noon today, Central Time, and that was exciting. Maybe we can talk about that later. But yeah, we'll see if there's any questions about this very lengthy section.
And the Q&A. We'll go ahead and we'll go ahead and address the Q&A. At least I had some thoughts.
Yeah,
I saw
good.
some fairly interesting things in there. You know, I had 3 questions, and probably the least the one that I probably had the least interest in her reading and answering is the one she answered, which wouldn't have been so bad, but she basically only read and answered the first part of it and ignored the second part of it, which is the whole reason I was asking it in the first place. The first part of my question was really just setup, really. And she just answered that like it was the question. I was just like, oh, well. So she's a busy lady, obviously. So she obviously maybe just didn't read the entire thing and get what I was getting at. But that bummed me out, because what I was really wanting to get from her, or maybe get some idea from her, and maybe she's not doing it on purpose. Maybe she was avoiding it on purpose. But I was just kind of wanting to get it from her, and what she's thinking about proving that the bones moved in the direction that she's claiming they moved, where, as opposed to what the state's going to come in and argue, and they're going to argue, no, they moved from Avery's burn pit out to the quarries. And that's what the state's going to argue. So I was really just trying to get her to vocalize a little bit on how she's going to argue that it moved the other way. And I was suggesting things like the 4th Dassey burn barrel, that, because Bobby Dassey claims they only had 3, and then they find 4 when they go during the investigation. So I was wondering if that might be a possible factor. I was asking if one of my other questions that she didn't actually answer, I was asking if possibly if DNA profile CX would be helpful in possibly proving that somebody else out in the quarry was active, and that the bones then moved from there to Stephen's pit. So that was what I was getting at, trying to prompt her to get her to speak about a little bit, but didn't quite work out, unfortunately. So you watch it, Travis? Did you
Yeah, I was able to tune in. I lucked out, and I saw a lot of the Aracose wrecking crew in there asking the questions that, for people that couldn't tune in because they were either asleep because they're on the other side of the world, or they're working, and they were frantically asking questions. I got one of mine answered, not really the one I wanted. You had a much more substantive question, but our group, the people on Discord, the Aracose wrecking crew, we were just kind of recapping right before this live started. 3 or 4 very good substantive questions got asked. She was on for a long time. The last one she had in October seemed like it went 30 minutes and it cut off. Mm-hmm. She put a blurb, okay, thanks for coming in and asking questions. I thought, oh, well, that's going to be it. And then she goes on for another 30 minutes, seemed like in a really good mood, answering off-topic questions, and asked, she said she'd sign a book, send it to her. People said, what would your advice be to somebody going to law school? And, it was just a really, really good mix. And, I think there's 100 questions minimum. I haven't gone back to look at these numbers, but it seems like she answers one question for about every 100 that gets asked. So the fact that we figured we have 5 or 6 questions at least that got answered in the Aracose wrecking crew group, and I realize those people belong, some of them to multiple things, but it was just really nice to see. Really good, intelligent questions. And mine was something that Tracy and I have really just been dying to know is, why was 8675, the hip bones, the pelvic bones, specifically listed in the motion for additional DNA testing filed in December. But in this current motion for violation of the preservation statute and constitutional violation for the destruction of evidence and asking for an evidentiary hearing, why isn't 8675 in her current motion? Because it seems like that would be her strongest argument. And I asked it 3 or 4 times, and at one time, 3 or 4 people asked about the same thing. And what she ended up answering was 8675 are the pelvic bones, and they're purportedly returned to the Hallbach family like the rest of the bones that were mentioned in case O.
Right.
1114, 1115, but didn't get into, why it wasn't, that number wasn't specifically mentioned in this latest motion. And because we don't know if it's an oversight or strategy. And so, it's just maybe something she doesn't want to talk about specifically. But I really liked your question because that remains a topic of debate. So people argue, bones that may be Teresa's, if they're confirmed that they're in the gravel pit / quarry, may not be exculpatory because he was trying to get rid of them from his burn pit. But, if you put it all into context with, all of her experts and everything that she's done, her position is, I've established scientifically that the primary initial burn area was not in that burn pit. Here's why. And, and we've gone through that. That's, some of the things we've talked about. But,
yeah.
And so I thought, your question was awesome. And it would have been nice if she expounded on that, explained a little bit why the direction is, the way she sees it. That
the state's going to come out swinging, saying that it went from the pit from the fire pit to the gravel pit. That's what the state's going to say. That. Yeah. So it's like, curious as to how we're going to be answering that. Anyway.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a slight to anybody. You're limited to the number of characters you can type in. She did answer some, substantive questions, but there's just a limit on how much you can put in there. And, I think to fully answer your question, she did it in the last one in October. She did 1, 2, 3, 4. And that kind of a neat style, here's the 4 reasons or whatever it was that and I can't remember exactly what it was, but, there's 4 reasons why. And then it stacked them all one after another. I know there's a way to do that, but, and my question, the answer was, it's way too long of an answer to go into now, but I'm satisfied with that because last time I got no love. Yeah. And this time, this time I got at least a wink.
Yeah, so, there you go. a nod and a wink. There you go. Yeah. So, Amber brings up someone asking her about who moved the bones, and her response was the killer. I saw that one too. I was like, there you go. That's a way to give them an answer they're looking for. Anyway, it was funny though. So, let's see. Anybody else? As somebody says, I loved the answer about wanting to punch KK in the face. I didn't see that one.
Yeah. It was, I'm paraphrasing, maybe somebody's got the exact same. Basically, I think this is close. His face is messed up enough. I wouldn't want to do any more damage, or it just it's bad enough.
Right.
But I don't know if anybody's got any comments or whatnot. But while you're pulling those up, we summarized a few, and we can just kind of go through those real quick if you want.
So you guys, if you have any of your questions about the ineffective assistance of counsel, now would be the time.
So so one of the things she commented on is that, this is my take on it. Again, it's like an 8-word answer, but she was asked about the RAV4 and she, the color specifically. What do you think about the difference of the color in the photographs? And her response was, doesn't matter.
Oh yeah,
the VIN number was checked. That's the RAV4. That was interesting.
Right.
She
So Amber, let's see. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Tony Frattini asks, were burn barrels found at the quarry? I believe there were no burn barrels found in the Manitowoc County gravel pit or anywhere in the quarries necessarily, but there were burn barrels at the Redont deer camp. And there was something recently that's come up about those. Something about one of the Dassey barrels, I think it was, that was actually a relabeled deer camp barrel or something like that. Anyway, I have to look into that before I say that with any conviction, but I was reading something.
Who we identified really quick that got questions answered. Julie Denise Ericoze, SS Camaro, Allie Denise, Christina. She mentioned, this was interesting, someone talked about, the $36 million lawsuit would be a strong motivation to plant evidence.
Yeah.
Her response was, avoiding a life sentence is more of a motive, essentially. Then she said, no one's recovered anywhere near 36 million. But her point was that, and again, it's the killer that would have moved the bones. The killer, avoiding a life sentence without the possibility of parole is much more of a motive than a civil suit. That was interesting.
Right. Okay, so Jamie asks, how involved are Buting and Strang in the new investigation with Zellner? Do they possibly talk weekly to go over missed or discuss current filings? So as far as I understand, I don't know how often it is, but I understand that Buting and Strang do occasionally talk with Zellner. They have phone calls with her, from what I understand.
My speculation would be that they've both told her that anytime she needs to contact them to do so, they're fully cooperative. They've provided affidavits. They provided affidavits in supplemental motions in this last summer on the if they'd had the computer information, how they would have handled the cross-examination of Bobby differently. There's no question in my mind that there's a very open line of communication between the three of them, and that they're being appropriate and cautious about getting into substantive testimony, that if she does get an evidentiary hearing and on ineffective assistance of counsel, Strang and Buting will be witnesses. So they have to be extremely careful what they say in public about the case until that time. And but that's a great question, Jamie. But I don't think they talk on a set schedule once a week, once a month. I think it's if you ever need us for anything comes up, let us know.
Right. And just the Carpe Diem asks, How much weight does ineffective assistance of counsel argument have usually with the appeals courts? I would say that it's always taken seriously, but I think it always comes down to meeting the thresholds for the tendency tests. Is that what they call it, Travis?
Yes, yes. You got to meet both prongs. That's absolutely right. So they look at it, but so it's one of those things. If you can establish it, it's an automatic retrial, like Brady. But you got to meet these thresholds, and so it's difficult to meet those thresholds. It cannot, for example, it can't be strategic.
Right.
Can't be, well, we looked at that, but we just decided for this reason, let's say, for example, the blood vial. And they said, yeah, we strongly considered blood in the sink. And we even hired an expert who looked at that. And we just decided we had a stronger case with the blood vial from the previous case and not using an expert.
Right.
That turns it to strategic, and all of that is out.
Right. Right.
So that's just an example. It's a hypothetical. I'm not saying that was the situation.
I get it.
And just to clarify for everybody. So, no, it's constitutional, like Brady. So if you can establish it, it's rock solid. It's meeting those two prongs of the test we talked about in the part one of IAC, and being able to reach those. But
you want to go ahead and cover those right now?
Well, the main thing is the main thing about all this is she's got to get an evidentiary hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, this is all academic. So the judge, Angie, denied it without even having an evidentiary hearing. The motion for post-conviction relief. The statute's clear that on this type of a motion, an 06 post-conviction motion, that the state shall conduct a hearing and make findings of fact and conclusions of law on the issues that the court deems to be, potential. It says, unless the court conclusively finds that there's just no merit, zero, to any of the claims in the motion. And so that's what's on appeal, essentially, is why she didn't get this evidentiary hearing.
Right.
So, but the standards, we've got this matrix on all of the IAC claims, and they just go on and on and on and on and on. But, she's got to show that what the attorney did or did not do fell below the proper standard for, the average typical defense attorney in that area.
Right.
Then, it's got to be a significant error. Can't be a slip up. It can't be strategic. It's got to be material and significant. Right.
Okay, so getting back to what I was saying about a deer can't burn barrel. So Denise Brainy, member of the wrecking crew, said that 7964 bone fragment 7964 came from a deer can't burn barrel. That barrel turned into a Yonda barrel. So that's to explain what I was talking about earlier. Anyways.
So Linda and Amber, they're kind of following up on that same question. I think what she's laid out in the motion are clear possibilities that need to be explored on ineffective assistance of counsel, and she should have been given an evidentiary hearing. We're kind of just shooting in the dark. We need to see what Strang and Buting are going to testify to. I suspect that they're going to testify on some of these things that, yeah, in hindsight, we should have done that.
Yeah.
And not doing that prejudiced Stephen's ability to put on a full defense. Now, we saw the opposite of that with the evidentiary hearing involving Brendan. We saw part of this in MAM2, where they had Kaczynski on the stand and the investigator. And, you know, they didn't show it fully. You have to read those transcripts, but you know, they were still trying to take the position that what they did was appropriate and trying to defend it, justify it. You did see Lynn after it came out, he said, well, you know, he did find that, you know, I was the one who preserved the issue. And then he felt vindicated, a sense of vindication when the Seventh Circuit overruled the exoneration, the finding a coerced confession. It's just sick, you know, just really, really sick. It was more about, well, I was right. You know, just you're just never going to get it. But
Right.
we had that testimony and those transcripts to look at. We're not going to know for sure until she gets her hearing, which is, you know, whether keep blocking her from ability to get hearing. Now, it may turn out there was no ineffective assistance of counsel. She may have to rely more on Brady, but she should at least be able to explore that possibility, like they were, like Brendan's attorneys were.
Well, Linda asks, in your opinion, Travis, do you feel that there is a strong case for ineffective assistance of counsel?
Well, there's which part? I mean, there's 3, 7. You know, here's the grounds for ineffective assistance of counsel. I'll just name 10. Not getting a blood spatter expert. Not having a trace expert analyst, not having a DNA expert, not doing experiments like her law clerk did, not having a forensic fire expert, not doing independent investigation like she's doing with Kirby and Kirby, not having their own, not having a well-qualified expert in anthropology.
Right.
Not having a police practice and investigation expert, not having a professor of law, licensed attorney to talk about prosecutorial misconduct. So, you know, I think she lists these in the order that, you know, you go from your strongest to your weakest, you know, primacy and recency. It's typically how you argue this stuff in appellate briefs. Start with your strongest argument first, and then your second strongest argument is what you want to end with, primacy and recency. So she's starting, you know, with no blood spatter expert, and I think she lays out a pretty good case for that. And assuming Strang and Buting don't have any explanation for that, or that the state can't establish that that was somehow a strategic decision, you know, I suspect that they're going to agree with her that could have been handled differently.
Right. I'll tell you the thing that I found interesting when I was going through this that I did not catch previously or hear of previously was how she was talking about they didn't bring in a like a trace expert like Skip or Dr. Symes to do microscopic examination of the Toyota RAV4 key, and what they ended up determining about the key that's in custody or that's in evidence, that well, first of all, it's all about establishing it's not Teresa's main key, right? And so she's going through all the reasons why that is, and it's all by itself. It doesn't have any of her other keys that she would need for her house or her studio or any other keys that she might need. It's, so that it's odd that it would be alone. But then she gets into talking about how the layer of dust on the key, on the, the metal part of the key, was like built up. And the way that they kind of prove that is they bring in 65 other keys that people use on a daily basis, right? Brings in 65 other keys, and that Toyota RAV4 key had more dust, micro, debris buildup on it than the 65 other keys. So that's basically telling you that most likely that key was sitting around somewhere collecting dust until it was picked up, and then it was obviously used to open a door or turn the ignition in the RAV4, because it also points out and I thought this was interesting too, because it points out in her motion here that you can see where the mechanisms of the lock or the ignition had like disturbed that microdust, that layer of microdust that was on it, and they were able to see that. So that was another interesting thing that I thought was cool. So let's see if anybody's got some questions now. These explanations about could have easily made dust appear on that key. Could have easily made dust appear on that key. The defense needed a DNA expert to hammer Culhane on her contamination issues. FL result should never have been admitted. That's pretty accurate. It's so obvious that the key was a spare that even Forrest Gump would have noticed.
Yeah, so she's hitting every possible facet, but for example, Strang and Buting did a pretty effective job on cross-examining Culhane about contamination. They effectively cross-examined her about having troubles with certification. She had the most contamination problems, violations in the lab.
Yeah.
And so that's not going to work. They're going to have to show other issues with the DNA, which is things like Dr. Reich, experiments demonstrate that the key was planted because the quantity of DNA on the subkey is not consistent with Mr. Avery holding the key, and had to have been planted by a richer source. So while she does mention things about having a strong expert, it's not based on what Strang or Buting failed to do in cross-examining Culhane. They did a great job cross-examining her. What she's pointing to is that they needed an expert to determine things like why that key was planted. And they were able to show that, it just doesn't have the quantity of DNA, or has way more quantity of DNA than you would expect. And she showed that scientifically, and made really, really good. That's paragraphs 361 through 364 of her post-conviction motion, by the way. But so there's a subtle difference. Strang and Buting, were some of the most effective trial advocates I've seen. And there's a lot of trial attorneys across the country that share that same opinion. I haven't heard any serious, solid trial attorney, heavy hitter trial attorney, say that they did an incompetent or bad job.
Right.
Which is different than saying IAC on certain areas.
Right. Okay, so Amber's asking about the money for experts. How will that factor in, Travis? Because they really kind of didn't have money for more experts, right? So how will that play in?
Well, that's going to be an interesting thing.
It's obviously going to be a wrinkle.
Well, the fee agreement is attached to the motion for post-conviction relief, and it's put in there. They got a good chunk of money, both of them, but given the nature of the case and how much time it took, and they both had to move to that town and rent an apartment and basically live up there away from their families for 3 months. What they made per hour wasn't a lot of money, right, given the work in the case. But when this comes up frequently, when the attorney gets a giant fee, or what's considered to be a really large fee, but that there's very, very little money used for experts. And so there can be a point made on that, well, why didn't you hire these people? But which is one of the reasons why I think they're going to agree that, yeah, this could have been done and it would have made a difference. Because the alternative, if you try and deny that, then you have to get into what evidence you do have. And it's like, okay, you each got whatever it was, each, but what you spent on experts was 1% or 2%,
right?
And that can be very difficult for a defense attorney. Really didn't have that in like the West Memphis 3, the documentary. HBO paid honorariums to everybody. So it was all of the victims' families got an equal share, and then the attorneys for the 3 defendants got money into accounts for experts, but it wasn't near enough. The money that was raised, when the big high-profile celebrities came in and they started raising some significant money, that was to hire big-time legitimate experts, which finally flipped that case. Fortunately, because of Kathleen Zellner's practice, she's got the means to fund the testing. And you saw that in her motions, the motion in December, want to do this rapid DNA. Avery's going to pay for it. We can get it done really quick. There's just not a lot of defendants that can do that. In fact, in Stephen's first case, through the Wisconsin Innocence Project, the order was, you're going to do testing. It's going to be through the Wisconsin State Lab, and when they get around to it. And we, of course, all know the story, what happened there. I think it sat in or on Culhane's desk for a year. I think that's what the situation was. But no, she got the ability to use some of the best labs and the most advanced progressive labs in the country.
So Linda Kay is asking, basically, because this is the largest part, of her motion or whatever, that is it really, would you consider this as what she wants to win with? I would have to say yes. Maybe not so much because it's the largest part, but it's going to be one of the things she wants to win with, because like Travis said, it's an automatic retrial. So that's one of the things about ineffective assistance of counsel that's good. Like Brady, if you prove it, it's an automatic.
I agree with that. You can't necessarily go by, you take a pile and you separate the brief and go, okay, well, this one, that weighs 25% and this weighs 10%. But Linda, I think that's an excellent observation. The reason why you put this amount of effort into that one ground is because it is an automatic. And unfortunately, Judge Angie sometimes rules on, you saw it in the computer thing, oh, you only spent one paragraph on this. You must not have thought it was very important.
Right.
Most judges, aren't going to say, didn't spend a lot of time, but, she went in later, a motion for reconsideration, and she's like, we submitted 15 grounds of ineffective assistance of counsel, and you didn't analyze a single one. But as Zellner, has said recently in tweets, and I think she touched on it today, that she's optimistic about the level of judges that she's got at the Court of Appeals, and she's cautiously optimistic about the analysis that this is ultimately going to get, whether it's this motion or ultimately the brief on the appeal of the denial of the MPCR.
Right. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this up now because people keep asking kind of around the same roundabout questions here. So I'm going to bring this up. Does everybody remember, okay, Dean Strang in Making a Murderer, when he was explaining what the prosecution does compared to what the defense does? And he was talking about the fact that the prosecution will bring as many charges against you as possible. They're going to hit you with as many different things as possible in the hopes that at least one, sticks. If one sticks, they win, right? That's basically it, right? So by bringing more charges, they're stacking the deck in their favor that they are going to get a win. Okay? So that's what the prosecution does every day. In every state of the union, every day. That's what prosecution does. So are you going to get mad at Zellner because she files in her post-conviction relief 15 different claims of ineffective assistance of counsel, as Travis just pointed out? She's going to put out every possible thing. She's going to hit them in the same kind of mentality as the prosecution. She's going to put everything out there. She's going to bring those charges, right, in the hopes that one sticks. And that's what it comes down to. It's a similar theory. And I love that it's kind of a way that Zellner is able to kind of turn the tables on the prosecution in this case and use their own, to use that tactic against them in a sense. So I think that's cool.
Yeah. And that it is a good point that, the state will charge every count against you and every lesser included offense. And unless, it serves their interest not to. And, we talk about that later, but when they just want a real serious offense and they don't want any lesser included. But normally, no, and we saw that in this case. You had all the sexual assault allegations and charges that they ultimately dropped, which was a strategy decision that String and Buting forced them to make early. They wanted to stretch that out because they didn't know exactly what was going to happen with Brendan. And they basically brought a motion saying, you know, Fisher cut bait, drop these, or, you know, let's go. And because they were on the horns of a dilemma, they'd done this big press conference and laid out this narrative that they knew that they could not put on without Brendan. And they ended up not having Brendan, and they ended up having to go with a completely different narrative than the press conference.
Right.
So in any event, but the procedure also forces Kathleen to include everything. The statute on the 06 post-conviction motion says, you know, you need to bring every claim that you know about or should know about in one motion. And if you don't, you know, you've heard Tracy and I use this term over and over again, you're procedurally barred.
Right.
And so she has to bring everything that she possibly can that she knows about or should have known about. And so that's why you do this. You present strong claims and you present, you know, some questionable claims. And as we get further in more segments, we'll even be talking about in some supplements and whatnot, she even kind of drops or hints that she's going to drop a couple of the grounds that are laid out originally in the MPCR. But, you know, we'll get that at the appropriate time. But no, if you don't, you're procedurally barred, which is what she mentioned in both motions, the one in December and the one that's pending, that she wants to do this so that, it, you know, if the court says no, then, you know, there can't be any question of a waiver or procedural bar. That she raised it. She set forth the reasons why it should be done now. But if they disagree with her, you know, she can go back and do the testing if she needs to.
Yeah. And that's another thing, folks. I mean, you know, don't buy into that crap you were hearing recently, you know, that was coming out in the media or whatever about Kathleen Zellner is trying to waste time and delay the appeal indefinitely and all that crap, man. Don't buy into that crap. You know, she had to bring this now. And of course the state, you know, wanted to make it seem like she was dragging this out. Like that was probably a ploy. They probably fed that story to the media because they probably wanted the people to start taking a negative attitude of Zellner, right? But the fact of the matter is, look what's come from it. Okay? We noticed it the day after she filed for testing that those bones were long gone. We noticed that here on my channel and in the Wrecking Crew. We noticed that right away. Okay? Then she gets to filing, you know, her motion basically saying, oh, okay, yeah, that stuff has been disposed of, and this is a problem because it's supposed to be protected by statute and, you know, that sort of thing, and it shouldn't have been disposed of, and if it was disposed of, Stephen Avery and his counsel at the time should have been notified of it, which they weren't. And that's where we're finding out that Stephen's appellate counsel at the time did not get the most recent pages of CASO explaining what had gone on with the bones that Zellner wanted to test. They did not get they did not get a copy of the ledger that we got on Friday, the 300 pages of ledger. Okay, the appellate attorney had everything on her ledger except for the entry that showed that they had given all of those or given stuff from those bone piles back to the hall box. That entry was not in the appellate counsel's ledgers, you know, or her paperwork. So she's now shown that two different ways the state was trying to hide what they did here. Okay? That to me seems very significant. You know, it's one thing for it to happen once and people can go, oh well, it was just an accident or something, or it was just a whatever, right? But when it's twice, it gets kind of beyond being, you know, an accident. So
Yeah, those are great points. I'm glad you brought that back up. You know, I'd forgotten about that. But I've got her reply right here. We talked about it in the live. No, don't get drug into that. You know, Eric Jose's mentioned in the past, you know, the things happen. I don't really think it's the prosecution that's doing it intentionally, but the media and social media platforms, you know, they try to come up with stuff, the other side, whoever they are, you know, to get our side to be divisive, and to, you know, weaken people on this side position, try and divide and conquer that way. But
right.
no, they use the term, if you'll recall, remember, like it was yesterday, that this appeal's been languishing on nearly 2 years.
Languishing, yeah.
And you know, I said then, and I'll say it again. You know, I said back then, I'll say it now. Appeals don't languish; people do. There's only one person languishing in this case, in a 6 by 10 foot cell.
Right.
And he's been languishing there for, you know, well over 10 years, going on 15, I guess.
Right.
And, you know, just preposterous. And Zellner hit him hard with that right between the eyes. Said, you know, it's first she calls it what you were talking about. They're the ones that have been carrying on with a charade of concealment. And then she hits him again, saying to suggest that the motion to stay the appeal and remand the cause suggests Mr. Avery's motion to remand for further proceedings are intended to perpetually delay this appeal. Her response: this suggestion is belied by the record, including the instant motion. You know, she comes back and hits him with the deal about, reminds me of Sam Kinison. Well, hello, Mr. Helper. You know, that helpful, you know, this helpful advice. Thank you very much that we should dismiss the appeal. What the state fails to mention in its helpful guidance to Mr. Avery is that it facilitated the destruction in 2011 of the very evidence that Mr. Avery would be hoping to test if he was so foolish as to voluntarily dismiss his current appeal. But I'm really glad you brought that up, Eric Jose. I don't know. I was hoping we addressed that, and you know, your subscribers at least came away feeling pretty good about the motion and why it was filed, and so on and so forth. I hope that the Q&A today that Kathleen Zellner did also helped reassure people that the appeal's on the right course, and you know, she is the right captain for this ship. And you know, sometimes these things we just need to keep reminding ourselves of. But yeah,
absolutely. Let's see. So Chase Postel.
Caden 461, 40% of officers abuse their wives. Did you know that? I did not know that. But what if 60% of the normal population abuse their wives? So does that mean officers are doing good? We'll probably need some more data on that to comment.
Chase says, Zellner is treating this like it's a normal case with normal opposition on the other side. Unfortunately, that's been proven to not be the case. Wisconsin isn't letting them out no matter what. And, you know, I have actually thought about that. I mean, Zellner does realize that this isn't just like normal. I don't know. This isn't like a normal situation, or I would think she would realize that. What do you think, Travis? I mean, is she, or is she just like is this just normal everywhere? I mean, obviously we had, G-Man Moore's take on the judicial system in that area. He didn't think too highly of it. He said the kids were running the show. I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is, and what that person I think is saying is that she does seem actually very casual about this.
I don't know. And watching MAM 2, I got the impression that she's, very type A personality, very much in charge and control, in command. She, very confident. Sometimes I guess that can be read by people. People throw this narcissistic word around now.
Yeah.
It's become a cliche. With all cliches, it dilutes the impact of the world.
Right.
A narcissistic personality, for those that don't know, I mean, you can go into DSM 4 or 5, whatever we're up to now, and look up what the elements are. Most people with a legitimate narcissistic personality cannot function at a high level like a trial attorney, number one. Number two, most people with a true narcissistic personality are either under constant intensive mental health care or in prison, if they're not institutionalized. But she strikes me as what most successful high-powered trial attorneys are, male or female. They got a giant pair of brass whatever, ovaries or balls, take your pick. They work hard. They know how to relate to the common person on the street, i.e. a juror or a group of 6, 8 or 12, depending on what the jurisdiction is. They can communicate. She fancies herself, a mystery solver.
Right.
But she's, very well versed in scientific and medical evidence because of her experience in handling medical malpractice cases.
Sure.
You have to have a personality where you're confident that you'll go to the mat with the drop of a hat. So we can weave something in that she said today. She was asked, if you were offered an Alford plea today, would you take it? And I don't know if y'all catch what her response to that was.
No.
Absolutely
she gets asked that every
not.
time. I know. And she says the
Absolutely
same thing every
not.
time. Guys, she ain't taking an Alford plea. Please stop asking.
And I think if she wasn't on social media, her response would even have been a little stronger than that, possibly. But you have to have that type of a personality where, I don't know how anyone can say she's taking it lightly. Let's say she's only put $200,000 of her own money in. The numbers I hear are anywhere from $500,000 up to $1 million. But let's just say she's put $200,000 in the case. She's not taking it lightly.
Right.
She's right there in it. From a lawyer's perspective, looking at how another lawyer's handling the case. Now, she does do social media and publicity, different than my style would be, but I don't have 19, 20 exonerations. I don't have more, the most exonerations of any.
Right.
I don't have any exonerations.
Right.
I do trial work. I don't do post-conviction work.
Right.
It's that old adage, there are people that can talk the talk, and there are those that can talk the talk and walk the walk. And there's no question in my mind, she can talk the talk and she can walk the walk.
Yeah, maybe we should think about a a potential post-conviction case that you might be able to look into. You can lean on the wrecking crew for research.
Well, there's one that's way worse than this, and it's out in your neck of the woods that I want to talk about one day.
Okay.
It's a horrendous case. Guy's been in jail almost 40 years on death row in San Quentin. And Governor Brown just ordered some new DNA. It's got racial overtones. I mean, it's a horrible case.
Okay. It sounds interesting.
But yeah, and it's right in your backyard, San Bernardino County.
Yeah, except I'm not a lawyer. No, but it'll be very interesting to look into, though. It sounds interesting. So, all right. So, do we have any more questions, guys? Because if not, I'm gonna go ahead and go to Cut to Stacy, and then so I can get that next video uploaded, because I think that one's gonna blow you guys away. So, any questions?
While we're waiting just one more second for that, thank you to Julie and Denise and your folks for asking questions for people today on the Q&A that asked Kathleen Zellner.
Yes. Thank you, everybody.
Help get a couple of people's questions answered that couldn't be there today. Thanks again to Julie for her slides that she did for those segments, and she continues to do. And thank you everybody for having good questions and your interest in the legal part of this. We're hoping it's informative and helpful, and we'll wait. Again, came up again today. The longer it takes for this motion to be decided, the better it is for Stephen. I think there's universal agreement among that. Doesn't mean it, automatically going to make it so that it gets granted, but clearly, they just took a couple hours last time to decide it, and it was, denied.
Right.
And so we're hopeful that, and Kathleen Zellner affirmed this, said that, are you worried it's taking too long? And she said, no, I'm not. It means that they're taking a close look at it. And it's something that you've been saying for a long time, Eric Jose. This is a type of case, whether it's legal or you're, armchair detective, that the more you look into this case, the more questions that you'll have. So, there's no deadline currently. For the court can take as long as it wants to decide the motion. I really think it's going to come down this week, but I'm not going to worry about it until we're at 41 days from the day that she filed her motion. And I know Julie or Linda or Denise probably have the date, the tip of their tongues, maybe.
What's that 41 days?
January 24th, was it filed, or 27th? The reply was filed February 1st.
Right.
But 41 days, Rebecca, is how I come. This is how I come up with it. The state had 11 days to respond, and so I don't think the court was even really going to look at it until the state filed their response. They actually got it in early, so let's go the full 11 days, and then something like this. They had a couple of snow days or whatever they call them in Wisconsin. Where it's just so freaking cold you don't even go outside. Doesn't matter whether there's snow or not. But anyway, 30 days for something like this would be usually the max. So 41 days. I can't remember if it was filed January, but that's just the day where I would start to worry. I fully expect we'll have a decision sometime this week, but
I'm just curious though. I mean, understanding what you're saying, but why would you start to worry at that point? Is there a point where if they don't make a decision, it becomes null?
no. So,
No? Okay.
You can, how you handle this, you send something off and then it just sits, and it could be at any level in the judicial process. You file a motion with the circuit court, district court, here's what we call it here, but you just don't hear anything. You don't hear anything. So there's a couple of informal ways. Every court of appeals in Wisconsin has what they call a staff attorney. And a staff attorney represents the court. They each have an individual law clerk, but there's also a staff attorney for the court. And you can call the staff attorney up and say, hey, look, just have a quick question, not trying to ruffle any feathers here. Got this motion pending. It's this, that, because the staff attorney sits in or knows what's happening with these motions and whatnot. They kind of track them. Mm-hmm. And, they wouldn't be able to talk about, oh, they're still mulling that around. That would be inappropriate, but they could say, oh, that's still under advisement. The court's aware of it. I can't tell you when a decision might be forthcoming, but it hasn't fallen through the cracks. So there are appropriate back channels that can be taken in that way, and things happen. Sometimes a judge becomes incompetent or seriously ill, and you have to do things to get the case back on track. And
right.
So
Okay.
Again, 41 days, it would be the minimum amount of time before we, I think, even need to start looking at that stuff. But
all right.
I think we'll get a decision this week, and hopefully it'll be favorable. But even if the motion's denied, it's still a win. She's preserved it, and then she'll start moving forward on the merits of her appeal.
Right. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up the live Q&A for ineffective assistance of counsel. Be looking for my Leo R video within the next half hour. Like I said, it's already recorded and ready to go. I just got to get it uploaded for you. So look for it within a half an hour, and let's cut to Stacy. This is the one I wanted.
Tick tock, and into a walk. Your silence breeds complacency. Tick tock, and into a walk. Stephen Avery, he shall walk free. Again, where to start? I don't know. So long ago, seems they had their sights on Avery. Should have been out.
Oh, there ain't no doubt.
All those involved lacked integrity. Tick tock, and until walk. What kind of message are you trying to send? Tick tock, and until walk. The truth always comes out in the end. Oh, like a curse, October 31st, so they say.
Something went down.
Maybe planned, but not well rehearsed still. I got 'em murder in the birth
With a story I can't believe.
Tick tock, man to the wall. It was all fabricated, don't you see? Tick tock.
I won't be singing God Save the Queen. That will never happen. If you want to see it, go over to my Doctor Who channel.
Tick tock, man to the wall. Tick tock, man to the wall. Tick tock, man to the wall. Wisconsin can be so cold. The scales of justice can erode. If we accept lies big and bold, or we forget we live on Avery Road. We live on Avery Road. Should be easy to see. This could be you, could be me. We shouldn't sit by idly, accepting everything that we are told. I live on Avery Road. I live on Avery Road. Avery Road.
Alrighty, folks, that's it for today. Be looking for the Leo R video coming within the next half hour. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe, and we'll see ya.
Good night, everybody. Great seeing you. Have a good night.